wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is how to stay open in the face of discomfort. And it comes after a listener's email that we were prompted into, actually having had a conversation pretty similar to this about a week ago. So before we dive into that, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and on the front page, sign up to join our tribe, where once a week we'll shoot you off a email with links to everything we've put out in the world so you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper, and occasionally something a little more intimate that Bridgie and I would share. So please join our tribe on nourishingthemother.com.au.
So I'm going to dive straight in with this email, if I may.
I would love to hear it again.
Hi, Bridget and Julie. Thank you again for your wonderful offerings. I have been listening to your podcasts, sometimes twice, to absorb the wisdom you give out. You ask, what do I yearn for? My authentic self. That the person on the inside can be seen on the outside. That the inside dark spaces can soften and be accepted to help me navigate my life. It's rediscovery and recovery from divorce after 25 years of what I've come to understand as being lost in service. Thanks for that insight. Where is my greatest struggle? Triggers. Your podcasts have really opened that up for me. With my children, my ex, his new partner, work, my experience with childbearing, myself. At times it can feel like a pinball machine, but I see lots of learning about myself in these triggers. Seeing the good in the struggle has taken time to open too, and it does shit me to tears sometimes. Why does it have to be through struggle? I would love to learn from positive experiences. Maybe this is what has drawn me to you. I feel I am ready for the voyage and can't wait to dive in.
Oh God, there's so much. I don't even know where to start.
There is, and I mean, you know, we say all the time, like, email us, and you know, we love this because
we really do love it. Like, genuinely, we love it.
Yeah, it gets us to really think about such big stuff, you know, that culturally we really don't get called into facing, because there's a zillion and one ways to not have to call yourself into those spaces within. So I suppose we could probably kick it off with, you know, the theme, which essentially is, you know, how do we make safe or, you know, stay open in that face of that discomfort? How do we, you know, when we want to run, stay. And this is in fact a conversation I was having with a dear friend of mine who's a new mum, you know, and she's really struggling with her baby's cries and her desire to fix them and all the beliefs that it brings up in her when she fails at that. Because, you know, we're so conditioned to see a crying baby as something to fix, something to manage, something to, you know, make more comfortable, because it's uncomfortable to listen to and be with. But it, you know, ultimately it's a reflection of what we can't be within our children is what we can't be within ourselves. And our children call us to widen that window of tolerance for them and in turn for ourselves.
Totally. You're looking at me like, Julie, what's the next step?
I'm just waiting for your wisdom to pour out. I've set the stage.
I feel like I need to bring it down because there's so much whirring in my head.
Yeah.
I'm kind of having trouble bringing it to a focal point. How to stay open in the face of discomfort. Well, actually, let's start with tonight because it's fresh in my mind, and then I'm sure my catalogue in my mind will move forwards. But tonight I had a conversation with my daughter that ended up with her in a puddle of tears because she'd been rather, in inverted commas, verbally abusive to so she's my second, to my third outside. And she thought I couldn't hear her or see her, and I could. And I was not happy with what was going on at all. And so I kind of metaphorically dragged her into the room to have a chat with her. And she's all, you know, huffed up, puffed up. You know, I can see her shoulders are dragged up towards her ears and she kind of arches forwards, and I feel like it's like armour. Like she's got this armour on around her heart, you know. And I think to some extent we all do that. Like whenever we're ready for a fight, we put on this physical armour. And so sometimes I think my job as a woman and as a mother is to de-armour And I think it's the hardest lesson for a woman in particular to learn because we are...
Are we given so many reasons to armour up?
Yes, thank you. I was trying to think what the way was to say it. Yes, because we're affronted so often in so many ways, and very often physically and sexually, and that armouring just kind of like a rhino skin just becomes thicker and faster, you know? So I also think it is really hard to ask ourselves to just be these open, loving flowers all of the time. And I don't think that that's possible. I think if you were open all of the time, that you would have energy just pouring out of you and there would be nothing left. So I also think you could die a slow death. That way I think there's quite a nuance between opening and closing, you know, expansion and contraction.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to my daughter. So she's puffed up and armoured up and she's like the rhino, you know, she's looking at me over her eyelashes. She's angry that I've pulled her up on this behaviour. And, you know, everything's, I don't know, you know.
Oh, God,
you know.
so grating.
Okay, so, you know, I just keep going. I just keep reminding myself. And there's nothing that gets my goat more than someone overpowering someone else, which is my bullying story, right, as a child. And so, bang, I see this happening with this older sibling taking on the power role and overpowering and quite aggressively the weaker in inverted commas.
And they're already in a powerful role.
So it's like my trigger. I'm like, you know.
Straight in.
Yeah. And even as I'm talking to her and I'm reminding myself to open, I can feel myself wanting to be like, and this rise of anger, and I just want to tell her off. And then I have to remind myself, whoa, hang on, she can't regulate if you can't regulate.
Yeah.
Bring
She's
it
not
back.
hearing anything. She's not hearing
Well,
anything.
and she can't, like in terms of even mirror neurons.
Yeah.
That not only, you know, are we mirroring past experiences, but she's literally embodying and mirroring me. If I'm in a triggered state, she is mirroring my triggered state.
Yeah.
I set the tone. And I can't ask a child to do something that I cannot do as an adult.
Exactly.
Like, and I really have been sitting with that lately. So, you know, I can feel the rise of anger. And so I stop speaking and I just breathe it in. And I make myself look at her and really absorb her. So this is part of opening, watching their skin, watching the softness of the light on their cheeks, looking at their pores,
And it gets you deeply present with them as opposed to your story.
Right, exactly. And this is part of opening. So you come out of your trigger and you come back again. And ultimately what I'm trying to do is talk to her about the fact that she's what we call mud throwing. She's got all these feelings in her body that she's like a corkscrew wound up through her whole day. And then God, the divine, the universe, whatever you want to call it goes, or you know, she's not quite there on that leap yet, is, well, you know, you haven't consciously stopped to spend time with these feelings that are just corkscrewing deeper in your body. So I'm going to give you the biggest gift I can. And here's your sibling who you can't escape from, who is going to literally press release on that spring for you. Go wail on them, right?
Yeah, yeah, perfect, right?
And so I'm trying to talk to her about this, is that it's not that her sister is annoying and frustrating and she's just so this and she's so that and all she ever wants is, no. You know, she isn't anything. She's the release valve for what you already have stored and you need to take the ownership here. It's not her. And I think this is a really interesting point and she gets it.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked about, and in the end, so we've talked about this and so I can feel her. I'm staying open now. My trigger's kind of, I'm breathing through it. So she's starting to open and then she goes, well, actually, and then pour out comes the thing that had happened during the day, right?
Yeah,
and
there's
then
always something.
there's always something. And then we talk about the meaning. So it's not just the thing, it's the thing that leads on to the thing that you've already decided in your mind means X, Y, and Z and so on and so forth. But when we were talking about this, and look, long story short, she has lost a school hat. Now tomorrow we have a special event at school that the kids have been told categorically they have to have their school hat for or they will miss out on it. And so she's got major FOMO to the point of tears and total meltdown of she's lost her hat this week, can't find her hat. And so she's going to miss out on this thing. And in my mind, I can hear myself wanting to say to her, wow, look, it's bloody $14 because I buy her another stupid hat. Oh, I could just email her teacher. Oh, I'm sure it'd be fine. But what I choose to say to her instead is, okay, so if you missed out, what would happen? And we talk about the scenarios. We talk about how she could stretch that into being something that she would enjoy. We talk about all of these options. And I said to her, and even if this thing happens and you miss out, and in that moment you're standing there, you don't have to put your armour back on. You could choose to stay with an open heart and speak your truth. And here's the thing with speaking your truth. When you speak your truth, someone else's body can recognise that truth and they will sparkle something back to you.
I love that.
Or you can choose to, like duck feet paddle. It's okay. I'm okay. I shouldn't be doing this. It's not okay. No one's going to, and people can't recognise in their bodies what your truth is, and so they behave differently around you, and you often don't like the way that feels. So you can choose to stay open even when it hurts. And you can choose to say to that person, I'm feeling really sad because I'm missing out. And I bet with your open heart, even in pain, you will find something pretty miraculous comes back to you. And she totally got it. So I haven't problem solved for her. I'll wait and see what tomorrow brings. But she has a toolkit of understanding in small increments through the gift of a sibling how to connect with your emotions, how to come back to your centre, how to stay open in the face of discomfort, and how to still speak your truth in that without losing yourself in it. And that is a skill too.
It's massive. And I mean, it's a skill that so many adults don't have, you know, like it's one of those things, because we're not surrounded by the demonstration of that skill. It's a stacking thing through these conversations over and over again. And what I love is that for every time we as parents are called into these places of discomfort with our children and being with their discomfort, we widen our window of possibility to be with that in ourselves. Like every time you're teaching her this, you're teaching yourself this. And likely on some level today or this week you needed to hear that too. Because,
I don't doubt it.
Because
who doesn't? Well, I feel like I need to hear it all the time anyway.
But whatever advice we give other people is for ourselves. It's like our subconscious talking to us.
Yeah.
And so that is so genius. And that is, again, we come back to this all of the time, but again, why the motherhood and parenting journey can be so profound as a path of spiritual and emotional, growth. Because it calls us into ourselves more deeply.
It really does. And so I don't know why I told that story, but I just had it fresh in my mind around this concept of teaching even in pain to stay open.
Yeah.
And this is tantric as well, that in terms of, tantra isn't just sex, tantra is a way of living, this sense of being open to all feeling and reminding and making safe all feeling to continue to open and continue to open and continue to open and to feel all of it, knowing that you can't disintegrate, to, open and open and open. And so I'm reminded of those practices as much, in our state of living when I think of this title as well. So coming back to this email, I found that interesting is, what did she say? She said something on there about why do the lessons always have to come through the hard stuff? Through
struggle, and, wouldn't I like them to be from positive experiences?
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all, right?
Would we learn?
Yeah, though, wouldn't we don't, right? We don't learn the same way.
I think we're so wired to just, crave pleasure that we rarely stop and actually, you think about the pleasures that you have. Okay, I've just renovated a house. I've already forgotten about the pleasures of a floor and a wall and a ceiling.
And yet that was all you were yearning for.
It's all, right?
Like that was like you were kind of clawing yourself into...
And running water. No, I still actually begrudge you for running water out of a tap. I'm like, oh my God, it's a miracle. But my point is more that if all we experienced was pleasure, we would stop taking it. We would start taking it for granted.
Yeah.
We would stop being in reverence for it.
It's like you can't know happy if you don't know sad.
Yeah.
We know things by their opposites.
Yes, exactly. And so I as hard as it is, I actually think you know, you could, if you were conscious enough, I think you could reduce the pain that you're running into at some level. I think you could learn the lesson down potentially at the feather or the brick. You don't have to get to the sledgehammer. But we're not all conscious all of the time of everything. So we're still going to hit sledgehammers in different areas of life.
And it depends on what what your purpose and mission is too. I mean, like if you're, you know, on some level, you know, really calling in some pretty profound growth. For pretty profound growth in a lifetime, you're going to hit huge challenges because they are ultimately what births massive transformation in us. So I totally believe in, yes, the feather, the bricks, the sledgehammer, but for some people and on their mission, you know, you see, like, you know, look at Elon Musk, like the amount of incredible challenge that he calls in. But it's like, I think it says in his book, he's like, the challenge gets bigger and he just gets better. You know, he just gets better. Because he finds he doesn't, you know, like this is a universal principle, you don't get a challenge that we can't handle. So he is given some of the biggest challenges that, you know, any human living in this planet right now is being given because he's calling it in because he can handle it. And, you know, and most of us mere mortals are like, how the fuck do you do that? But, you know, who knows how many thousands of lives he's lived before, you know, to be at that level now. It's another discussion.
And it is, but also different areas of life too.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, and what is pain? And what is trauma, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And one person's trauma is another person's, you know, speed hump.
Yeah.
Like it just depends on what your values are. It depends on what your past experiences are. It depends on what you define as trauma. Like it's very nuanced.
Well, trauma is a reaction to an event. The event itself isn't traumatic.
The event itself's neutral.
Yes, which is also fascinating. Anyway, I feel like we're off topic again.
We are a little bit. But if we're talking about this, you know, back to this principle of, you know, how do we, you know, stay open in the face of discomfort? I mean, a simple one is even just the discomforts that our bodies bring us, you know, and we,
instead of popping Panadol.
Yeah, you know, like because that is we're in like a pill popping culture where there's a zillion and one ways to not feel. But the implications of that is that we, you know, as you talk about so often, we dull our capacity to feel all of the things if we're only willing to feel a portion of them. And so, you know, even today we found ourselves in the car like 20 minutes away from a shop and my son was like at that point of like crying because he was so hungry. Because it was just, well, you know, those times where you're just not prepped and you just get in the car and you're like, oh, fuck, we forgot about lunch. And, you know, so, you know, I could either get plugged in to his constant whining and discomfort and desperation and get frustrated, which is where my husband was leaning actually. But instead I was thinking to myself, this is a wonderful learning opportunity because I don't think he's actually really ever had to get that hungry. And so it was, you know, a conversation in terms of learning about his body and like what that feels like when your tummy is like so hungry that it almost hurts because you're just starving. And how do you deal with your emotions in that? Like I was talking to him about how sometimes I get so hungry I'm almost angry and then I cry because I'm, you know, can't handle the feeling of being hungry. You know, and then after we'd had lunch and he'd obviously eaten quickly and then he had a terrible tummy ache, then it opened up the conversation of, yeah, because you were so hungry, your tummy was like, you know, almost stretched because you ate all this food so quickly and your digestive system was overwhelmed. And so, you know, we learnt all of this stuff just by simply staying open with the sensations that he was having to face physically and emotionally instead of, you know, feeling bad or me like wanting to shut it down or me, you know, like, you know, all of those other things that we can get plugged into when our kids are, you know, demanding or having a hard time. And it's another simple way of how staying open with the range of feeling that our kids can bring us can help them connect more to themselves and to their bodies when we see that as a learning opportunity as opposed to something to avoid or shut down or fix for them, you know, because it can be so easy to like scramble to fix their problem, but there's, you know, there's wisdom in their problem. And you know, we take away the opportunity to find that if we're always preempting or, you know, being one step ahead of any challenge they might face.
I think it's an illusion that we can create a world in which our children experience no challenge, no pain, no sacrifice. I'm not sure what type of person that creates.
I think it creates an entitled person and a person that's out of touch with, the plight. I think about this in terms of like the plight of humanity and like how can you possibly feel into another human's experience if you're unwilling to feel the depth,
feel your own.
You feel your own, and also be willing to be affected by another human's experience,
which in and of itself is being open. Rather than tended to.
There's real merit in that, and I think we disconnect from our heart when we try to avoid that. And the depth and breadth of what a human experience offers.
So when you read this title, what is it that you thought about?
I think it's this constant question that I ask myself too, like, because I think about what I'm modelling as a mother and how I face my own frustrations and annoyances and how to, rather than try to change those states within myself, how can I be more okay with my frustration and that as an emotion, and my feelings of anger and that as an emotion, as opposed to wanting to change those things, because they are all, important for us to have and what that they give us. I mean, we're about to dive into shadow and LTL, and I think, gosh, that week for so many women is such a light bulb, because it's like all of these things that we tell ourselves or that we have reflected to us that are not okay.
We shouldn't feel, we're not in gratitude. Follow your fucking happy.
Just be kind, or be kind always, or you end up bipolar if you're trying to follow all of these socially acceptable. And you'll know what yours are because it'll be what you can't handle in your kid. It'll be what it'll be your child.
It's true, they're such an excellent mirror.
They're because I've noticed I've
got to charge an entitled. Selfish.
Yeah, you do. And I've been riding my son a bit more lately because he's home so much. I'm getting him to do more jobs around the house, and I heard myself saying, I don't want an entitled child. Oh my God. Because I've spiraled forward about what that means.
Yeah. No, I do. I get that.
And I've been having conversations about how to be at the table, because we're going to be going and staying with your relatives, and they're not going to appreciate when you do X, Y, Z at the table, and starting to teach manners and all of these kinds of things. And I do this dance between what's fitting in and what's being authentic. And
What's repression? But
it is interesting because the things that jar with us are our own parts of ourselves, likely as children that weren't okay, or that we were told quit that, stop that behaviour, or you'll be this or you'll be that if you keep trying that on with me, or all of that stuff that our parents couldn't handle or their friends couldn't handle and we internalised.
Yes, I do. I get it. So how do you stay open? Think about even in your relationship, in the face of discomfort.
Yeah. I breathe a lot. And I think that's that practice of not needing to, reminding myself I can be here. This feels hard, but that's okay. Because, I know I have a story of, I'm pretty sure it's almost if we're fighting, or if we're really disagreeing, or if we're kind of out of balance, then that means that our relationship is doomed, or that you kind of end up with this. You've made the
story.
Yeah, you make the story. And so then what can happen is that you do everything that you can to avoid getting to those places, because those places mean X, which is bullshit. It's just a story. And so, and that comes from my parents avoiding conflict, and that really not being modelled for me. That was not something that I really had, took it that I had, to learn to move through.
I just so love what you said then, was that, in your head you realised these feelings or conflicts mean, in the story that you've run, my relationship is doomed, I'm going to get divorced, and my life is over, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so then you do whatever you can to avoid those feelings in a way to avoid the inevitability of the story.
Yeah.
Which is genius.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd so succinctly, I just love the way that you said it. I just thought that makes it so clear as to why we kind of avoid or make peace. Can be very good peacemaker.
Peacemakers, yeah. And I think that's the number one, I think, the thing in the way of our authenticity in our relationships, because if we've made a whole bunch of things mean something, like in our own story,
then we'll avoid them.
Then they'll be the things that we don't go to in our relationship. And so those are things that I'm consciously seeking to open up within myself, and interestingly, like other family stuff that's been going on has called us both into more awareness, I think, of what our own, because our relationships, I mean, he's called in his mother wounds through me, and I've called in like my father wounds through him, like it's the wounds of the feminine and the masculine meeting each other in relationship.
Well, it's so fascinating that our family that we create will be almost identical in terms of the dynamic of our family of origin, with just enough difference that you want to stay in there, but a lot of sameness so that you have to face the same challenges and grow through them.
Yeah. It's I've seen a couple of videos that I've posted lately. There was one in our member group, actually. It was a Jordan Peterson one, which was interesting, and it was always talking about, like, fuck that illusion about, needing to be all connected. Like, your partner needs to trigger you. Like, you need to get angry. And if they're not, like, they're not calling you into your own growth. Like, that's what they're there for. And then there's another divine 25-minute, which I never really get stuck into these things, but I totally didn't. It was an interview with Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith.
They're fascinating.
Fascinating couple.
Yeah, they are.
And so when it was talking about, like, they had to almost break their relationship.
I think she's pretty spiritual though.
Yeah. It sounds like it. And she really called him. She, like, because he did this. He's got a massive, ego story. And he in it he talks about how he, had, when she was 37, he began planning her 40th birthday party. And it was like he had Mary J. Blige coming to sing. Like, it was like the biggest of the biggest of the big. And she had a horrible time and basically called him on it and said, this is your party. This is not for me. This is for you. And she called him on it, and he was so angry, I think, from the shame that he was being called to face, because it was true, but he hadn't let himself see that was true. And so that called them both into some massive growth in their relationship. And, he's like, I went and read like 50 books on like relationship and like behavioral psychology, and like, and you can see in like his evolution of self that has been profound for him. And just like now their attitude to their relationship is, that they recognize projecting on each other. They recognize that they have really separate values, and that they can still be divinely in love and have really different values. Like her beautiful ideal of a holiday is a family, in matching jumpers at Christmas, and tradition, and like the same thing every year. And he can't handle it. It freaks him out, but he does it for her because it's important for her. And whereas he loves adventure and like travel and something new, and like it's not her thing, but she loves him, and so she joins him in that and finds joy in that. And it repeats a lot of what we, I guess, teach through the podcast and in our programs. Is our relationships are not supposed to be meeting the sameness, you can say that. Yeah. The sameness, they're about helping us expand more parts of ourselves and learning how to relate deeply to another human and love them, even when sometimes you can't even recognize them, but love them anyway. So, yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a segue, but yeah, like staying open even when you want to run sometimes.
So you breathe, you focus on breathing?
Breathing and opening my body.
What does that mean?
Like opening up my shoulders, being willing to feel centrally, like, so being willing to, because I have a massive, like, my safe place is in my head. It's where, I live a lot of the time, and I think so many of us do. And so it's about being more aware of how I'm holding my body in relationship to my partner, how I'm relating physically, because that's he has a really strong love language around that. He is very affectionate. He really desires touch and feels really felt and validated in that way, and can feel really like chopped liver if I don't meet him there. And so it's even when I'm challenged to still find a way to be in that space, you know, and not make it my story, you know, not get up in the head again and spiral into my story, which takes me immediately away from being able to be present in my body to what's coming up. That would be how I would. What do you do?
Hang on. I was just going to say, I read this study the other day that was talking about listening and, you know, the ability to listen. And there was this study that was done that had a direct correlation between the depth at which you breathe is literally, I'm not sure I can't remember what the scientific word is, but a direct correlation to the depth of listening that you're able to maintain.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So
that makes perfect sense, right? Like physiologically and
yeah.
I love that.
So the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. And I think if you remember nothing else, remember that.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, at any moment, any time of your day, whoever you're with, even yourself, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. I think that's amazing.
It helps you hear. It almost correlates with the idea of you being able to therefore hear more and integrate more, you know. Because,
Totally. Because you're remaining open, because you're able to metabolically listen. It's fascinating.
That is.
Anyway, I just thought about that as you were saying. I don't know if I have anything to add to that other than I can dialogue at the same time as feeling something. So that helps me deal with the trigger when I'm, you know, I can be with my kids, but, you know, not probably so much by myself. I'm feeling really angry right now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and do this.
Yeah.
And then I'm coming back, you know, and if I'm with my husband, I say, well, you just said this. And so now I'm thinking that, and my body is now doing this, and now my head is here. I just need you to know where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Because it completely changes the way that he's responding to me, which, like I'm telling my daughter Jade, is be in your truth. Even when it hurts,
And
or
even
you're
when
not
it's uncomfortable,
and when there's uncertainty. You know, it's not our partner's job to deal with our own uncertainty.
Yeah,
it's ours.
Yeah, it's true. It's such a great point.
So I do use dialogue if I'm feeling really triggered and not able to necessarily physically open my body at that point in time. There's kind of like a bit of a barrier.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I would do exactly what you do. I would breathe. I would literally stay in there. So I literally keep in front of my body open and facing him, and I just breathe in, almost like breathing in that emotion rather than trying to make it go away. And silence speaks 1,000 words, and that quote has you know, stood the test of time for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, there's 1,000 stories that happen in silence. Silence is speaking. So I think we have such a discomfort for silence and such a desire to fill it that we've lost the capacity to feel it. So I also, and I know that in myself too, because I can feel a rising anxiety with silence. And I certainly noticed that over the course of mostly my work in women's circles and being with women in birth, is noticing how much is said in the silence that you can't hear when you're speaking.
Yeah.
You know?
Because when you're speaking, you're thinking only about what you're saying. You're not thinking about, you're not willing to feel.
Yeah. And also just trying to really listen to someone already deciding in your head what's happening and what the story is and what you're going to say next. And that's not really listening.
No.
So I just practice being in silence, and I think our partners are a wonderful way to practice being in silence. How long can you stay here for? This palpating, velvety feeling, how long can you breathe it in for? And so I just practice that, and I say in my mind, it's safe for you to be here. It's safe for you to be here.
Yeah.
It's safe for you to be here. It becomes my mantra. And so I can usually quell my body that way and sit in it and sit in silence long enough that often it allows the space for that other person to say the next thing rather than it being on my dialogue.
And then also it keeps you out of your patterning of like being reactionary as well, because you're bringing presence to the desire to want to do that potentially and not and just feeling into that space.
Yeah. And I do think it's worth having, particularly when we're talking about in partnership and remaining open, is having some sort of format that's pre-discussed. in terms of conversing. If you're not particularly good at communication, then you probably need some sort of format for it. And as much as you think that sounds stifling or in some way not authentic, to have a framework allows you to speak deeper truth than just repeating the same cycle. So, this is something my husband and I have worked on over years is, I've heard of the Queen's Code, but I've actually heard it several places now, which is interesting in terms of, and with my son as well, if I want to have a conversation, I don't just jump on
right
them.
in. Yeah.
No. I say, I really want to talk to you about X. So can we make a time, or when can you do that, or can we do it here? And we make a time. They know there's no anxiety. They know what it's about. They know when they're doing it, and they have time to close the filing cabinet they're currently working on and open the filing cabinet that I need the presents for. I think that works really well. So I would always do that, and then I would let them speak. We always do a speaking with active listening, followed by paraphrasing or saying back, okay, so if I've got it right, what I'm hearing is, so I think what you're saying is, and if it's not right, having the opportunity to rehear it until you're able to say back to that person, I really actually totally get what you're saying. And then at the end of that, okay, so have I got this right? And they go, yes, you have. I go, okay, is there anything else? Because often there's like the entree that's, still left sitting there.
Yeah.
So, and I think when you feel completely emptied, then you're able to be more present as well, because you're not trying to shove something to the side. So I do think having some sort of format helps you stay open, because there's a sense of safety that's kind of propped around that.
Yeah.
And I think you still need safety to open. You can't open if you feel in danger.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So you've either got to create the container that you didn't grow up with in which to feel safe, and do the work during your day to, practice with your kids, on your kids, with your own sense of self.
Yeah.
Practice making more safe so that you can bring it into your other areas of life. But you've got to create some safety, and you don't have to keep replaying the way that it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I do think you need safety, and I think safety comes from doing what you need to do for yourself, but also perhaps having a
framework to work.
Yes.
So that creates that.
I do. Yeah. And then being willing to step into embodiment, to step out of your head long enough to be open. You are, if you are a female, you are, well, look, and a male too, but as a female, your core is, well, not always actually, I can't even say that. If you are a female seeking the feminine embodiment, that you are a vehicle of receptivity. And the way that works is to allow yourself to be penetrated. And I'm not meaning physically, I'm meaning metaphorically and metaphysically. So the idea of being the vessel of receptivity that feels like, well, I don't know, I kind of imagine it like a beautiful, warm, soft yoni, but it's like energetic around me and it kind of embraces the person in front of me. So, Bridget, I've probably embraced you by my metaphorical yoni at some point.
I like being embraced by your metaphorical yoni.
But the point is to consider that you are a being of receptivity, and you will find your sense of centre far more easeful when you focus on receiving a person rather than trying to penetrate a person.
Yeah.
And if you are dealing with a masculine core, be that in a female or male body in front of you, for you to be in the state of receptivity will create an arc of electricity that will allow them to also enter their receptivity, and your penetration, you'll form a circuit. But I do really work on that as well, is what would it mean right now to really receive this person, to really feel them, to really open to them. What would that feel like right now? And I think, do whatever you want to do, but that's certainly what I do. So how do you stay open in the face of discomfort is to realise that resistance is always the way, right?
Yeah. It's the uncomfortable truth, the uncomfortable, inconvenient truth.
It is. The very thing that is most painful, the very thing you want to turn away from is actually the thing that has within it your greatest capacity for growth. And I'm kind of a rip that Band-Aid off type of person. So I'm going to go, right, okay, I see you there. Today I don't feel strong enough, but I know you're there, and I know that I'm not going to lose an opportunity because I know you're not going anywhere until I jump into you. And then one day when I know it's sitting there and I'm building it in my awareness, oh, there you are again. Oh, there you are again. Yeah, okay, I see you there. Oh, that's really starting to get a little bit more painful. Oh, now that's really like creating rifts in whatever area of life it's in. Okay. All right. What do I need to do to, build the skills that I need to be in this discomfort and move through it? And that's growth. And I think it's easier when you do it with a tribe and don't think that you are responsible for having all of the answers for yourself, because you can't often see the wood for the trees.
You so often can't.
So I hope that you've gleaned something out of staying open in the face of discomfort and realising that, if it was all sunshine and rainbows or beer and Skittles, as Bridget says, which I love, that you would probably end up taking everything for granted. I don't think you'd actually have the dramatic steps of growth. But at any point, you can choose to enter the pain rather than turn away from the pain and switch it off.
Yeah.
So we just invite you to consider what that might look like for you. And thank you to our beautiful listener who wrote us an email and prompted this train of thought. We really do enjoy your emails. We really are incredibly grateful that we get to share this time with you, our gorgeous listener, who we know your time is precious and we're in your ears and you're part of this tribe, and we honestly just makes our heart sing without sounding cliche, but it really does.
We do like a little happy dance when we get these emails, because it's just, and so often we read them in the midst of like a crazy day or just overwhelm or whatever it is, and it's like, oh, it's so nice to be touching people in this way.
Yeah, so it really is. So please email us, and if you've got a topic suggestion, we would really love to hear it. I think we're much better with questions than we are necessarily riffing on our own topics of choice. So please email us or private message us through Facebook or Instagram, which is Nourishing the Mother on both, and we're now on Pinterest as well. What else? How to connect with you, Bridget?
SuburbanSandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com.
Remember to nourish the mother to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.